Trauma always has a history, and history is always, always, always difficult. It's this huge file where you have to open up and you read page after page and after page, and every page, every sentence you read brings up these horrendous emotions. It changes your moods, then you have feelings, then things live inside your soul, they come up to the surface and they destroy everything you've built. For the longest time, we try to push them away. It's like you have a dirty room, you're too tired, you're too exhausted, life is too busy for you to open its door and walk in and just fix it up. So you say, you know what, I'm just going to lock the room, I'm going to occupy other spaces in my house. There comes a point where it's just tough, you can't do it anymore. I don't know why. Maybe you have lots of your family members coming over saying, we want to sleep in that room. I'm tired of sleeping on the kitchen floor. And so at some point you're just forced to open this door. And you find yourself in a territory where almost everything that you see is just undigestible, it's too much. In the Buddhist philosophy, they have this term, it's called hungry ghost, that your eyes are really, really, really big. And your mouth even is really, really big. In other words, when you desire something, you become so greedy. I want 25 eclairs. And you say, yeah, I can put all the 25 eclairs in my mouth. But your throat is so small. You can only do tiny bites at a time. You say, I'm going to look at all of this history, and I'm going to process all of this history, and I'm going to overcome it. And that's a hungry ghost, where you assume that you have the courage and the capacity to look at everything all at the same time and process everything within a couple of days and get over it. So you build yourself to be something that you are not really, but assumptions and illusions have overtaken you. So after many years of dismissing your own story, there comes a point where it says you can't. And you look at it and everything about your life begins to change. And it falls apart, it really does. Then you see it, different parts of it, and it's layered. And if you want to look at things in isolated events, you're not going to get to a place where you want to go. If on the other hand, you see as a link, just this chain, every hand is joining every other hand, then there comes a moment of paralysis. And then you want someone to walk into your life to help you. And you've tried many, many times. It's no different than an addiction of sorts. You want to overcome certain habits, certain ways of thinking and feeling and self-sabotaging, but it just doesn't work. And you need help. The problem with seeking help is that now things become practical. Let's say that you and I are in a relationship. You and I meet, you've been in 5 relationships, and all of them have been bad because of you. You've read some books, you've attended some workshops, you have a journal, which everybody does these days, so you write your stuff down. And intellectually, everything looks very sound. And now we're in a place in our relationship where you say, I love you, and I say, I love you back. We occupy the same room. Things become practical now, real now. And now you see that all the old habits are slowly coming to the surface. And you're ruining yet another relationship. But here's the difference. You're 45 now. You're no longer 20. You don't have the luxury of time, of youth. As time passes, you get older and you get uglier. And as you get older and uglier, well, you get lonelier. And you become very insufficient. So you want to make this work. And let's say I am much, much, much better than you in this relationship. I'm not going to get emotionally entangled. I'm not going to just react. I'm going to think, reflect, study, and then maybe act. So every time you do something, I call you out on it. What is different about this relationship at this stage in your life is I demand that you change, not on paper, not by reading a book. I want to see it. I want to make sure that when I come home, you're not on your laptop. I want to make sure when I come home, you're not just on your phone. I want to make sure that your relationship with me is stronger than your relationship with the cell phone. Now, the problem with any relationship that demands practical transformation is that you realize you just don't have the proper tools. So when you speak about trauma, I guess what I'm saying is there are these different stages. First, you push them away. Nothing wrong with that. And if you can push them away for the rest of your life, and then you're on your deathbed, and the immediacy of death says, remember this past, it never got resolved, and then you die. That's a great life to have. If you're not that fortunate, where traumas come to the surface. And by trauma, I just mean a set of stories that disrupts your life in a very drastic and powerful way. They disrupt your life for 5, 10, 20 minutes, maybe 5, 10 days, okay? Then they go away. Then you have 20 good days. That's a good life to have as well. Hopefully you'll have a companion who's forgiving, who's patient, who's compassionate enough to kind of just sit there at the very cemetery of the relationship because everything is falling apart, knowing full well the relationship will again resurrect and it'll be healthy for at least 20 days. Then you have a different stage where it's no longer a trauma, stage 2 or stage 3 cancer, it's stage 4. It's not going to go away. It's everywhere in your life. It has penetrated every single branch of your life. Now what happens, you're at a different stage. Now you begin to be sad, sorrowful, angry, hateful, filled with resentment, fits of violence even maybe, that you take out on a punching bag somewhere. You begin to read books, you begin to talk to your friends, and your friends begin to realize something about you has changed. You are more of a brute now, you're raw now. You're not digestible, you're not fun to be around. You begin to read books. Let's just say you're at a place where you're relatively healthy enough to say, I have these issues, I want to fix it. So now you turn to books, now you turn to people for companionship, for venting and all that. Then you say, no, I need some quacking person, some living person sitting across the table from me. I'm going to tell them, and hopefully, because it says John Doe therapist, PhD after his name, that he or she is somewhat good, relatively speaking. So you talk to them and they say, well, do A, B, C, D, and you do that for a while. Nothing wrong with that. But being with a therapist and being with the ideas given to you by the therapist, if it's not a relationship, if it's a business transaction, if there is no love, if there is no care, ultimately your therapist becomes just another book. That ideas get to be repeated over and over again, and then you just, whatever feeling you have for your therapist, it just goes away. Then you go to a therapist, and the therapist, another therapist, and that therapist has a bio online for you to read. Went to Yale, got 25 PhDs by the time I was 20. Got married, she left me because I was not so good. Got remarried, she left me as well. Then I went out there and got myself a dog. The dog left me as well. Then I got really, really depressed. Then I did all sorts of drugs. I did alcohol. I did all sorts of crazy things. And I realized that my degrees really had no value, zero value to life. It was good to sit in the library and read books and pass exams and have a PhD after my name. But now when the storm hits, I realize there is no shelter. I have some kids out there and I've been a crummy father. And as you read this guy, you realize, oh my God, this guy has had a wealth, money-wise, intellectual wealth, physical wealth of sorts. He's also lost everything because you were just an idiot. He went through rehab for many, many years. He went through many years of depression, loneliness. And it seems that he has used his trauma as a source of wisdom, like Job. And he sits you down and he listens to you for a couple of days. And every time your mouth opens and you tell him a tiny part of your traumatic history, he stops you and says, let me tell you a story. And he tells this story that's long. It takes hours. And for some strange reason, you're able to relate. And then you realize that the only person who can really understand you is that particular therapist who is like Job, who's gone through stuff, who's overcome stuff, he understands, despite all the limitations that human beings suffer from. And then you realize that the only place that can shelter you from this particular storm is your therapist's office. So you occupy that space as often as you possibly can. You sell your car, you sell your house, you sell your kids, you sell your dog to have enough money. And remember, to be in a relationship, you need to make sacrifices. Without sacrifices, you will never, ever, ever be able to build relationships. And you don't sacrifice things that you have no value in. You don't find value and meaning in. You sacrifice things that are meaningful and relevant to you. The reason why it's difficult to sacrifice is because despite the fact that you say, I have trauma and I want to get over it, the truth is you like the trauma, you like the anger. You know who the villain is. It's been a purpose of your life for the past 20 years. I know you want freedom from it, but once you're free, where are you going to go? Who are you going to hate? Who are you going to talk to? Who's going to be your friend? What are you going to watch? What punching bag are you going to use? There is nothing to punch anymore. There is no person out there to be angry at anymore. Now you become self-sufficient. And then when you become self-sufficient like God, you have to create things. You have to write your own book. And now you have to think well. And then you have to express things well. Make sure that when you write, things are coherent, logical. You haven't missed any gaps. And by occupying your therapist space, and this is like a very practical way of overcoming something. And it's a gradual process, and you're going to fail many, many, many times. And you can't be your own support system. It's impossible. You need someone from the outside, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, someone out there, a Bible, who cares? Something needs to say, listen, yes, it's tough. You're going to slip. You're going to get bruised up. Get up. Do it over again. And you need someone from the outside. I mean, you've lost to this guy, you've lost your coach, you hate your life, you hate your wife hates you, you're not there for your kids. You have an entire world going against you. Yet you have one Apollo Creek, a guy you used to beat up. Now it becomes your best friend telling you can do it over and over again. Which means that your therapist, you need to go to his house. You need to eat his food. You need to just be around him all the time. And what happens when you're around with someone all the time, without really knowing, you begin to adopt their mannerism, the way they speak, their body language, the way they think. And the more you can occupy that space, the more of you lose, and the more of them you adopt. And after 5-6 years, you say, oh my God, I'm no longer myself. I hold the cup this way, I drink this way, I speak this way, I feel this way, my taste in music has changed, my taste in this has changed, and now you're no longer the past. You're a brand new person. And I'm making things very, very clean, but they really aren't. I mean, you get muddy from head to toe, and there is no shower to be found. And you have to kind of live with the mud for a long, long time. I mean, life is a really, really messy business. And anyone who tells you can get over this mud after reading a book or a couple of workshops or 2 years of therapy, it's not going to work. You just have to grow a very, very, very thick skin. Part of the problem today is our culture doesn't give us a thick enough skin. We break far too easily. And the things that, it starts very early on. For those of us in this class who have children, we'll tell you, man, it starts from grade 1. Your 5-year-old doesn't listen too well. He is 5. He wants to run around. He wants to break things. That's what 5-year-olds do. You want them to be focused on what? Math? Are you kidding? And so what happens is, if you're not careful, they will medicate your child. And the next time something drastic hits, like they get an F in college, well, now they're completely depressed. When their marriage falls apart, when their parents pass, and that's not the way you can kind of survive life. I mean, I always tell my students, go to Mexico, go to India, go to certain parts of Africa, go to the Middle East. These people have nothing, and yet they have the happiest of lives, happy in suffering. Books are good to some extent. Thinking is good to some extent, but ultimately, man, I mean, that's one of the best things you will ever read in the Bible, the book of Job. You need to be touched. You physically need to taste the things. Absent of that, you're just an intellectual. It means nothing.